Members of the hard-right House Freedom Caucus are entertaining the idea of forcing a government shutdown to secure spending cuts and policy concessions. A stopgap bill supported by the White House, Senate, and House leadership is currently on the table. Now, the last government shutdown happened 4 years ago. The month-long lapse over Donald Trump's border wall went down as the longest government shutdown in modern history. It affected hundreds of thousands of government workers. But don't worry, there is another item on their agenda, another unpopular gambit that is doomed to fail and likely to end in embarrassment. Some Trump allies in Congress are pushing ahead with a plan to try to impeach President Biden. For what? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is tiptoeing around this impeachment minefield. He doesn't seem to be that into it as he deals with groans from Republicans who think it's a major waste of time, while also trying to keep the peace with the far-right Chaos Caucus members who are pushing for this impeachment inquiry and are, by the way, the ones who held up his election as Speaker. There's a lot going on here. Joining me now, Charlie Dent, former congressman from the state of Pennsylvania and executive director and vice president of the congressional program at the Aspen Institute, and Joe Walsh, former Republican congressman from Illinois and 2020 Republican presidential candidate, author of the book F Silence. And I love you both. You know that. But Charlie, I'm going to have to put you to the side for a second because you were always... How do I say this politely, Joe? You embodied some of what we're seeing in the Chaos Caucus right now. So I need you to get into their heads for me and just help me with the math. There are, let's say, 20 of them who would like to see Donald Trump, like to see Joe Biden impeached or have impeachment hearings or whatever it is they're trying to achieve. There's almost an equal number of Republicans, more like what Charlie was, who are not interested in this nonsense, some of them because they're in districts that Joe Biden won. So the math is not there. There's no possible math for Joe Biden being impeached in the House. Tell me what is going through the minds of those people on the far right now and what they're trying to accomplish.
Ali, they look at where the Republican Party voter is. And a little bit of context here. 86 to 88% of Republican primary voters right now are supporting Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, or Vivek Ramaswamy. As you said, hard-right, crazy caucus, the MAGA caucus, this is a MAGA party. The vast majority of Republican voters don't believe Biden won. The vast majority of Republican voters want Biden impeached. So these House Republicans, and the House more accurately reflects where their voters are than the Senate, they're going to do the bidding of where their voters are, especially, Ali, on top of that, when you put the fact that the nominee of the party, the leader of the party, Donald Trump, is demanding that Joe Biden be impeached. That's what's driving this.
Charlie, let's talk about the other side now. The Republicans who either think this is just messy and unnecessary and not great to run on in 2024, that government shutdowns, budget, debt ceiling showdowns, things like this. And then you combine them with those Republicans who won the House in districts that Joe Biden had won. What are they doing about this? How do we get around this? How does a moderate, I don't want to call him moderate, but how does a Republican who doesn't want to be part of the Chaos Caucus and doesn't want that nonsense to go on have an influence here today?
Well, what they really need to do is work the Senate, because the Senate ultimately is going to drive this process. I see this playing out in one of maybe two ways. The House GOP will send a bill to the Senate to keep the government funded, but they'll add provisions that are very controversial, fairly partisan. Democrats won't support it. It will go to the Senate. The Senate will send back a bipartisan bill to fund the government, to provide for disaster relief, and to provide funding for Ukraine. And they'll send it back to the House where Speaker McCarthy will have to make a decision. Either eat what the Senate has sent them or reject it and send back something else that would lead to a government shutdown. That's what's going to happen. So a lot of these more, I'll say, more pragmatic members don't want to shut down. They know that the party making the policy demand, in this case, the Republicans, will be blamed for the shutdown, which, of course, is very disruptive and really pointless, frankly. So that's how I see this playing out. Of course, there might be a side deal here, too. It could be McCarthy could get a CR vote from his hardliners in exchange for them getting a vote on an impeachment inquiry, which, again, will be deeply problematic for those more pragmatic members in competitive districts. Really something that they ought not engage in. But that's how I see this playing out at the moment.
So, Joe, keep your Tea Party hat on for a second. There is a world in which these folks who are the Chaos Caucus I could stop calling them the Chaos Caucus because they just might hold very conservative and somewhat libertarian views with which I maybe don't agree but are worth discussing. But we don't talk about these things. We talk about procedural junk that is holding up the business of the American people, right? There's a way to get through all of the underlying discussions, but we seem to do everything. It's all brinksmanship now, right? Everything is about how bad can I possibly make this so that you have to listen to my demands. How do we fix this system? There's got to be someone in that Chaos Caucus who's saying there's a better way to do this than taking Congress hostage every time we want to do something. And I mean this as a serious question. How do we validate the fact that they have political views that are different from ours, but we can't stop the business of the American people just to debate these things?
Ali, I'd continue to quibble with your premise about the crazy caucus. As someone who was part of a crazy caucus, it's no longer a caucus. I really think this point needs to be made for the American people to hear. This Republican Party now, Ali, is not the party I was part of 9, 10, 11 years ago. It is now a fully MAGA party. This is not some wing now. This now is the party. And yes, back in 2011, I was one of the leading voices, and Charlie Dent probably was throwing things at me back then to shut down the government because I wanted a serious conversation about government spending. Ali, as you say now, they're not interested in that substantive conversation. They're now radicalized. They want to talk about other issues that have nothing to do with government spending, and they want to put forward issues like investigating Donald Trump, pulling back on these investigations that have nothing to do with the issue at hand. It's a radicalized party right now.
Well,
Charlie, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say there's an answer, though. The way you deal with this rump group, and it's grown, there's no question that it has grown, but you deal with it the same way McCarthy dealt with it during the debt ceiling issue. He struck an agreement with Hakeem Jeffries to help him get the procedural votes to bring up the budget agreement, which by all my calculation was a pretty good deal. But they marginalized that wing. In other words, so they got Democrats to help them pass the rule and then pass the bill itself, where there was strong Republican and Democratic support. That's how you marginalize these people, push them to the fringe. But that means he has to cut bipartisan deals. And that also means that exposes him to a rearguard action from those who want to take him down or vacate the chair, remove him from speakership. But that's the only way to deal with this group. Which is,
one might argue, is what he's trying to do, Joe. I mean, if you, as somebody who's not in Congress anymore, how do you evaluate what Kevin McCarthy's doing? He doesn't want this to happen. He didn't want the debt ceiling thing to happen. Oh. He doesn't want this to happen. But he also doesn't ever come out and yell at those guys on the far right. Is he actually doing a relatively good job here of saying, all right, I'm going to let you guys vent, but in the end, the government's not going to shut down. It might be in the 11th hour. The three of us might be sitting one night very late talking about this in a couple of weeks, but he might succeed.
Look, he's still speaker, and that's all he cares about. So he's done a very good job of hanging on to the speakership. I think Charlie's right, Ali. I think what McCarthy's going to do here is get the hard right MAGA caucus, as you say, to agree to a spending deal, and then he'll throw them a bone of launching an impeachment inquiry. I think that's the deal. That's the needle I think McCarthy's going to try to thread. It's a no-win because there's no basis for that, and it's still going to piss off other people. But I think that's the bone he'll throw.
Charlie, is the impeachment thing going to be too damaging for a bunch of Republicans who are in close districts?
Well, it's certainly not going to be helpful to them, an impeachment inquiry. And frankly, I don't know if the House GOP has the votes to pass an inquiry vote. I just don't see it at the moment. But if I'm a Republican in one of those New York districts, one in Pennsylvania, one in Nebraska, and I can go down a long list of members where this impeachment inquiry will do them no good. I mean, and the other issue is, we're going into a presidential election year. Why don't we decide this at the ballot box? That's how you take it out on Joe Biden. Don't need to go into an impeachment where you really don't have the basis to really begin it. I get the Hunter Biden issue smells terribly, but that has not been directly connected to Joe Biden. And so I think they're making a miscalculation, the House GOP. They're overplaying their hand here. where they should just deal with the Hunter Biden issue as a political matter, and they can make some points on that. But they want to take it to the next step with this impeachment, which will be very damaging to those in those marginal swing districts.
Guys, thank you as always. Charlie Dent, former Republican congressman from Pennsylvania and executive director and vice president of the congressional program at the Aspen Institute, and Joe Walsh, former Republican congressman from Illinois, author of the book F Silence. And if we get close to a government shutdown, I'm calling both of you. All right. The legal cases against Donald Trump are moving forward, and so do the fast-moving efforts to challenge